On January 2nd, AD 1492, Muhammad XII, the last Nasrid ruler of Granada, surrendered his capital to Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile. Royal standards and a Christian cross rose above the Alhambra, announcing that Muslim sovereign rule in Iberia had reached its final boundary. Yet Granada did not fall in a spectacular final assault. No apocalyptic storming of the walls decided the peninsula's fate in a single afternoon. By the time the banners changed, the kingdom had already been politically divided, economically constricted, territorially dismantled, and militarily isolated. Its ports were lost. Its revenues were shrinking. Rival members of the ruling dynasty had fought one another while a stronger enemy tightened the frontier around them. Muhammad XII, remembered in Castilian tradition as Boabdil, surrendered under negotiated capitulations. Sovereignty was exchanged for guarantees intended to spare Granada the consequences of conquest by force. Those guarantees were extensive. Granada's Muslims were promised security in their persons and property. Their mosques, religious practices, judges, customs, and local institutions were to be respected. Forced conversion was prohibited. The settlement was not written in the language of extermination. It was an instrument of calculated accommodation, accepted because Ferdinand and Isabella wanted the city intact and because Granada's defenders still possessed enough strength to make an assault dangerous and expensive. Within a decade, much of that settlement would be broken. Welcome to Archives of Humanity. I am Professor Adrian Lockwell, the Time Detective, and this is the case of a kingdom whose destruction helped redirect the ambitions of a rising monarchy from the fortified frontiers of Iberia toward the oceanic frontiers of the world. The familiar history of AD 1492 is often divided into separate stories. One belongs to medieval conquest, the fall of Granada, celebrated by Christian chroniclers as the completion of the Reconquista. Another belongs to the history of religious persecution, the expulsion of practicing Jews from the dominions of Ferdinand and Isabella. The third appears to open an entirely different age, Christopher Columbus receiving royal authorization and sailing westward across the Atlantic. History did not experience them as isolated chapters. They emerged from the same court, the same political partnership, and the same expanding machinery of royal authority. On March 31st, less than 3 months after Granada's transfer, Ferdinand and Isabella issued the decree later known as the Alhambra Decree. Practicing Jews who refused baptism were ordered to leave their realms. On April 17th at Santa Fe, the fortified settlement constructed outside Granada during the final campaign, the monarchs granted Columbus the titles, privileges, and rewards governing his proposed western expedition. The conquest of the last Muslim kingdom in Iberia, the expulsion of practicing Jews, and the authorization of a voyage across the Atlantic belonged to the same year. This convergence was neither an accident nor the execution of a perfectly designed imperial blueprint. Ferdinand and Isabella possessed no map of the future. They could not foresee Caribbean empires, oceans of American silver, forced migrations across continents, or the scale of the political and ecological transformations that would follow. But their court had developed a formidable method of power. Rival elites could be coordinated behind a sacred objective. Religious legitimacy could unlock taxes, credit, obedience, and sacrifice. Negotiation could replace destruction when negotiation was cheaper. Coercion could follow once resistance became politically weak. The same monarchy could promise protection in November, proclaim victory in January, order expulsion in March, and authorize expansion in April. Granada stood at the center of that transformation. Its conquest did not simply finance Columbus, nor did every soldier, coin, and ambition suddenly move from Andalusia into the Atlantic. The relationship was more subtle. Victory released political attention. It magnified royal prestige. It strengthened the belief that providence favored the monarch's ambitions. It demonstrated that faith, finance, diplomacy, intelligence, and calculated violence could be fused into an instrument of extraordinary reach. Even the word Spain can distort this moment. Isabella ruled Castile. Ferdinand ruled the crown of Aragon. Their marriage created a dynastic union, not an instantly centralized nation-state governed by one law, one currency, or one administrative system. Castile and the territories of the crown of Aragon retained separate institutions, treasuries, legal identities, representative traditions, and political interests. Their partnership was powerful not because those differences had vanished, but because two monarchs learned to coordinate distinct realms behind shared objectives. Their authority still depended upon negotiations with nobles, municipalities, clergy, military orders, financiers, and regional institutions. They did not possess unlimited power. Their achievement was the construction of coalitions capable of sustaining policies that neither crown could have imposed so effectively alone. Granada, therefore, was not crushed by a fully formed modern Spain fulfilling an uninterrupted national destiny. It confronted a developing dynastic partnership whose rulers had survived succession war, aristocratic opposition, Portuguese intervention, foreign rivalry, and the constant danger of elite defection. Their strength rested not merely in commanding resources, but in persuading, rewarding, pressuring, and sanctifying enough institutions to make prolonged war possible. The old triumphal narrative presents Granada's fall as the inevitable conclusion of nearly 8 centuries of continuous religious warfare. A rival romantic narrative imagines medieval Iberia as a paradise of effortless coexistence, abruptly destroyed by fanaticism. Neither interpretation can contain the frontier's contradictions. Religious hostility was real, so were crusading ideology, raids, enslavement, forced displacement, and the sanctification of conquest. Yet religion never operated alone. Christian rulers fought other Christians. Muslim dynasties fought other Muslims. Castilian kings accepted tribute from Granada while trading with it, negotiating truces, exchanging captives, and intervening in Nasrid succession struggles. Exiles crossed confessional boundaries. Frontier lords made temporary arrangements with supposed enemies. Rival courts exploited one another's civil wars whenever opportunity outweighed solidarity. Faith shaped identities and justified violence. Ambition often determined where that violence was directed. For generations, Granada survived within this unstable system. It was weaker than Castile, but weakness is not helplessness. A smaller state can endure when stronger neighbors are distracted, internally divided, or willing to accept tribute instead of paying the enormous price of occupation. Nasrid rulers did not need permanent victory. They needed to ensure that complete conquest remained less attractive than temporary coexistence. That strategy worked for roughly 2.5 centuries. The Nasrid Emirate emerged in AD 1232 amid the disintegration of Almohad authority and the rapid advance of Christian kingdoms across southern Iberia. Other Muslim states disappeared. Granada remained. Its population grew as Muslim refugees arrived from conquered territories. Irrigated agriculture supported dense communities. Mediterranean trade connected the emirate to markets beyond Iberia. Artisans produced silks, ceramics, and other coveted goods. Tribute purchased intervals of peace. Fortified terrain raised the cost of invasion. Diplomacy transformed the rivalries of stronger powers into breathing room for a vulnerable dynasty. The Alhambra can obscure this harder achievement. Later memory turned Granada into a kingdom of graceful decline, as if the Nasrids had spent centuries waiting beautifully for defeat. But palaces do not explain political survival. Revenue does. Information does. Commerce, geography, tribute, and timing do. Survival also depends upon recognizing when an enemy prefers payment to occupation, when a rival court is too divided to sustain war, and when submission in one season can preserve freedom of action in the next. By the late 15th century, that equation was changing. Granada's old methods had not suddenly become irrational. The political environment that made them effective was disappearing. Castile was becoming more capable of returning to war across successive campaigning seasons. Artillery increased the pressure on fortified towns. Credit and ecclesiastical support extended military endurance. Nasrid dynastic conflict created opportunities no cannon could manufacture. A frontier once shaped by bargaining, tribute, raids, and temporary truces was becoming a theater of systematic territorial reduction. The deepest mystery is not why a small kingdom eventually lost to a larger coalition. That answer is too easy. The real mystery is why Granada survived for roughly 2.5 centuries, then watched its protections fail together during one decisive decade. The trail leads back to AD 1232. Muhammad I inherited no secure kingdom and no promise of survival, only the wreckage of a collapsing imperial order. From that wreckage, the Nasrids constructed one of medieval history's most adaptive states. A kingdom preserved not by military strength alone, but by defensible terrain, Mediterranean commerce, costly tribute, political intelligence, and the carefully managed rivalries of more powerful neighbors. Granada's longevity began in catastrophe. In AD 1212, Almohad power suffered a devastating defeat at Las Navas de Tolosa. The battle did not immediately erase Muslim rule in Iberia, but it accelerated a political disintegration already gathering force. Almohad authority fractured into rival courts, local strongmen, and cities searching desperately for protection. Castile, Aragon, and Portugal exploited the vacuum. Córdoba fell to Castile in AD 1236. Valencia fell to Aragon in AD 1238. Seville would fall to Castile in AD 1248. Within a single generation, the political map of Al-Andalus was torn apart. From that wreckage emerged Muhammad ibn Yusuf ibn Nasr, better known as Ibn al-Ahmar. Proclaimed ruler in AD 1232, he established himself in Granada by AD 1238 and became Muhammad I, founder of the Nasrid dynasty. His achievement was not the restoration of vanished Muslim supremacy. It was something more difficult, constructing a viable state beneath the shadow of stronger powers. Muhammad understood the brutal arithmetic of the century. Granada could not defeat Castile in a prolonged contest of territory, manpower, and agricultural resources. Castile could, however, be negotiated with, paid, distracted, and occasionally assisted. Under the Treaty of Jaen in AD 1246, Muhammad accepted a relationship of vassalage to Ferdinand III of Castile. He agreed to tribute and military obligations. Nasrid forces even participated in Ferdinand's campaign against Muslim Seville. To later generations, such cooperation could resemble betrayal. In the political world of Muhammad I, it was triage. Seville was unlikely to be saved. Granada might still survive. The preservation of one Muslim state required abandoning the illusion that every Muslim city could be defended at once. Nasrid's sovereignty was therefore never absolute, but it did not need to be absolute to remain useful. Tribute was humiliating, expensive, and politically dangerous, yet destruction was more expensive. Payments to Castile could purchase recognition, truces, and time. They also gave Castilian kings a financial reason to postpone conquest. A living tributary might be more profitable than a ruined province requiring occupation, garrisons, and reconstruction. Granada accordingly changed roles whenever survival demanded it. It could be an enemy during one campaign, a vassal during another, a commercial partner across the frontier, an intermediary in diplomacy, or a prize deferred while Castile confronted more urgent dangers. This was not weakness disguised as strategy. It was weakness converted into strategy. Geography made that strategy credible. The Nasrid realm occupied a mountainous southeastern core protected by fortified towns and difficult corridors. An army could cross the frontier, but penetrating the kingdom required food, animals, siege equipment, roads, and secure communications. Every additional stronghold increased the cost of advance. Granada's mountains could not defeat Castile by themselves, but they could transform a rapid invasion into an expensive political commitment. Behind those defenses stood a concentrated agricultural system. Irrigated districts, including the Vega of Granada, supported dense communities through canals, orchards, mills, and carefully administered water rights. Mulberry cultivation sustained silk production. Sugarcane grew in warmer coastal zones. Dried fruit, ceramics, leather goods, and textiles entered Mediterranean markets. Malaga and Almeria connected the emirate to North Africa, Italian merchants, and the commercial arteries of the Western Mediterranean. Genoese traders became especially significant. They carried Granadan silk into European markets, extended credit, and operated through local networks that tied the emirate to a world larger than Iberia. Those same routes also moved enslaved human beings. Christians and Muslims captured through war, piracy, and frontier raids were ransomed, exchanged, or sold. Granada's prosperity was genuine, but it rested within a violent commercial order. Its ports were economic lifelines, and that made them strategic vulnerabilities. Trade could not erase the deeper imbalance. Granada governed a narrow and densely populated territory. Castile commanded far greater reserves of land, grain, livestock, taxation, and military manpower. A failed harvest or interrupted trade route struck the Nasrid Kingdom with disproportionate force. Tribute diverted wealth from fortifications, armies, and court patronage. The mountains that obstructed invaders also complicated internal movement. Granada could sustain formidable defenses and a brilliant court, but it could not endure unlimited war against a fully coordinated northern enemy. For much of the Nasrid period, Castile was not fully coordinated. Its monarchs faced aristocratic rebellions, succession disputes, royal minorities, financial crises, conflicts with Portugal and Aragon, and struggles within the ruling dynasty. Every Castilian fracture created Granadan breathing room. Nasrid rulers sent envoys, offered tribute, supported competing claimants, renewed truces, or waited for a crisis to redirect Castilian power. When royal authority weakened, pressure on the frontier receded. When it strengthened, Granada paid, conceded territory, or searched for outside assistance. North Africa offered both protection and danger. The Marinid rulers of Morocco crossed the Strait of Gibraltar, sent armies into Iberia, and presented themselves as defenders of Islam. Yet the Nasrids could not treat them simply as liberators. A Marinid force strong enough to resist Castile might also dominate Granada. Nasrid diplomacy therefore balanced between Castilian and North African power, sometimes drawing one into Iberian politics to contain the other. Rescue could become conquest under another name. The frontier itself was not a clean boundary separating two permanently united civilizations. It was a militarized region of fortresses, pasturelands, markets, family connections, and recurring violence. Raiders seized livestock and captives. Prisoners were exchanged or ransomed. Merchants and smugglers crossed boundaries defended by armies. Local commanders negotiated temporary arrangements even while royal courts invoked sacred war. Christian warriors entered Muslim service. Muslim exiles sought Christian support. Rival dynasties repeatedly weaponized one another's internal conflicts. This was coexistence without harmony. Practical cooperation emerged because neighboring communities had to function between campaigns. The same frontier also generated enslavement, dispossession, mutilation, and fear. Religious identity remained politically powerful. Christian rulers drew upon crusading language, papal support, and indulgences. Muslim rulers presented resistance through the language of jihad. Yet neither religious framework determined every alliance. Faith defined the moral universe in which rulers operated. Necessity frequently decided which bargain they accepted. The career of Muhammad V revealed this flexibility with exceptional clarity. Driven from Granada by a dynastic coup in AD 1359, he sought support beyond his kingdom and recovered his throne in AD 1362 with assistance from Pedro I of Castile. A Christian king helped restore a Muslim sultan because the arrangement served Castilian interests. Nasrid factions, in turn, maneuvered within Castilian rivalries. The frontier was not merely where kingdoms fought. It was where legitimacy itself became negotiable. Granada's court culture flourished inside this dangerous system. The statesman and historian Ibn al-Khatib served Muhammad V as vizier, diplomat, physician, and man of letters. His career embodied both the sophistication of Nasrid government and its lethal instability. He negotiated across kingdoms, endured exile, accumulated enemies, and was ultimately strangled after accusations of heresy and betrayal. The same court that cultivated poetry, medicine, philosophy, and architecture also functioned as an arena of surveillance and factional struggle. Refinement did not soften power. It gave power a more elegant vocabulary. The kingdom was also transformed by refugees from territories conquered by Christian rulers. Muslims moving south brought labor, artisanal skill, scholarship, commercial contacts, and memories of lost cities. Their arrival enriched agriculture and urban life, but it intensified pressure upon a restricted territorial base. Every skilled artisan strengthened production. Every additional household required grain, water, land, employment, and defense. Demographic vitality became a source of resilience and a growing strategic burden. Across roughly 2.5 centuries, these mechanisms reinforced one another. Mountains increased the price of invasion. Tribute purchased pauses. Trade converted specialized production into revenue. Diplomacy exploited dynastic rivalries. Refugees replenished society. Fortresses slowed campaigns, while truces interrupted them. Granada was never secure. Its survival depended upon reading the ambitions of stronger powers and acting before those powers could align. That history bears little resemblance to an uninterrupted 8th century national crusade advancing according to a single inherited plan. Medieval rulers did not possess modern national identities, and conquest did not move in a straight line. It accelerated, stalled, reversed, and became entangled in marriages, rebellions, commercial interests, and succession wars. Sacred purpose was real, but the ability to act upon it rose and fell with political capacity. Granada endured within the distance between conviction and coordination. By the late 15th century, that distance was narrowing. Castile's internal struggles were being brought under firmer royal direction. Aragonese diplomatic experience was joining Castilian wealth and manpower. Noble ambition, municipal resources, church revenues, and crusading legitimacy were beginning to converge around a sustained campaign. Granada's survival machine had been designed to exploit fragmented enemies. It was about to confront Ferdinand and Isabella, rulers learning how to bind those fragments into organized war. Granada's old methods of survival had not become foolish. The balance had changed because its principal rival was learning to coordinate power on a scale the Nasrids could no longer match. When Isabella claimed the Castilian throne in AD 1474, her victory was anything but secure. Her niece and rival, Joanna of Castile, commanded support among powerful nobles and received the backing of King Afonso V of Portugal. The War of the Castilian Succession was therefore more than a dispute over bloodlines. It was a contest over which aristocratic coalition would control Castile's offices, revenues, alliances, and future direction. Isabella's marriage to Ferdinand of Aragon gave her cause a formidable partner, but it did not create a unified Spanish state. Castile and the Crown of Aragon retained separate laws, currencies, representative institutions, and political traditions. Isabella occupied the center of Castilian government. Ferdinand brought the strategic education of the Aragonese world, Mediterranean diplomacy, experience with dynastic conflict, and a talent for exploiting rival interests without becoming permanently captive to any one faction. Their union joined complementary strengths, but it remained a negotiated partnership between crowns, not the effortless birth of a centralized nation. The Treaty of Alcacovas in AD 1479 stabilized Isabella's position by ending the succession war with Portugal. It also divided zones of Atlantic ambition. Castile retained control of the Canary Islands, while Portugal secured recognition of its privileged claims across much of the African Atlantic. In the same year, Ferdinand inherited the crown of Aragon. The royal couple emerged from crisis with strengthened legitimacy, but not unlimited authority. Their power still depended upon nobles, towns, clergy, military orders, financiers, and regional institutions whose cooperation could not simply be commanded into existence. The monarchy grew by coordinating these forces. Great aristocrats controlled retainers, fortresses, and regional networks. Municipalities controlled money, militias, grain, carts, and draft animals. Military orders possessed estates, fortified positions, and experienced fighters. Church institutions supplied revenue, preaching networks, and moral authorization. The Santa Hermandad, a crown-supported league of municipalities, helped police Castile while providing taxation and armed manpower. Ferdinand and Isabella did not abolish this crowded political landscape. They learned to conduct it. Their achievement was not absolute control, but the alignment of competing ambitions behind royal objectives. Granada offered the ideal objective. A southern war redirected noble violence away from Castilian factional struggles and toward an external enemy. It promised land, offices, captives, plunder, prestige, and sacred honor. Because the monarchs distributed privileges and arbitrated disputes over rewards, successful magnates became more dependent upon royal favor even as they expanded their own fortunes. The campaign thus disciplined aristocratic aggression without eliminating aristocratic power. Papal crusading privileges intensified this convergence. Indulgences gave participation and financial support spiritual consequence. Ecclesiastical revenues helped convert preaching into wages, provisions, weapons, animals, and credit. Religious conviction and political calculation were not opposites. Ferdinand and Isabella could sincerely understand the conflict as a Christian war, while also recognizing its usefulness in consolidating authority. Human motives rarely arrive in separate compartments. Faith can restrain ambition, but it can also sanctify it. Power can serve belief, while discovering that belief is an extraordinarily effective language of mobilization. The result was not an all-powerful monarchy. It was something more practical and more dangerous. A monarchy capable of persuading rival groups that the same war could reward them all. That coalition then had to survive contact with distance, hunger, debt, and fortified resistance. Earlier frontier warfare had often centered upon raids, seasonal devastation, captive-taking, and sieges abandoned when supplies or political patience failed. The Granada War increasingly followed a different logic. Strongholds, roads, agricultural districts, mountain corridors, and ports were attacked in cumulative sequences, with each captured position becoming a platform for the next operation. Gunpowder accelerated this transformation, but it did not determine victory by itself. Large bombards and smaller artillery pieces could batter towers, fracture defenses, and make prolonged resistance psychologically expensive. Yet walls did not become irrelevant. Guns had to be cast or purchased, transported, positioned by specialists, protected from attack, and continuously supplied. Saltpeter, sulfur, charcoal, projectiles, ropes, timber, tools, and replacement parts had to reach the correct army at the correct moment. Roads required repair. Wheels broke. Animals died. Engineers, miners, masons, smiths, carpenters, and laborers became as essential as mounted nobles. Behind every bombard stood a ledger. The crown drew upon taxation, extraordinary levies, municipal contributions, church support, loans, and the machinery of the Santa Hermandad. Town councils received demands for grain, money, troops, carts, and animals. Credit bridged the dangerous interval between a royal order and the arrival of actual revenue. Forward bases protected magazines and supply routes, while captured fortresses extended the range of future campaigns. This was the unromantic anatomy of conquest. An army that could not eat was merely an armed crowd. Artillery without animals was immobile metal. Courage without replacement powder carried an expiration date. The coastal cities possessed special importance. As long as Granada retained Mediterranean ports, aid from North Africa remained possible, even if it never arrived on the scale the Nasrids required. The progressive loss of those ports narrowed access to trade, reinforcement, diplomacy, and escape. Catholic operations were not merely consuming territory. They were closing Granada's remaining doors to the wider Islamic Mediterranean. Castile's greatest advantage became its capacity to return. A failed assault did not necessarily end the war. One punishing season could be followed by another levy, another loan, another artillery train, and another campaign. Granada faced the opposite cycle. A shrinking tax base, disrupted agriculture, divided command, and fewer places from which to replace losses. The decisive weapon was organizational memory, the capacity to count, borrow, transport, repair, learn, and resume. Yet the deepest breach in Granada's defenses was not opened by cannon. It appeared within the Nasrid dynasty. Sultan Abu al-Hasan Ali ruled amid military pressure, contentious taxation, court rivalry, and a succession dispute that transformed personal ambition into a national vulnerability. His son, Muhammad XII, later known in Castilian tradition as Boabdil, became the center of an opposing faction. Muhammad's mother, Aisha al-Hura, was not merely the tragic figure preserved in later legend. She was a politically important royal woman associated with her son's cause and with networks hostile to Abu al-Hasan's court alignment. The famous rebukes later attributed to her belong more securely to literary memory than verifiable conversation. But her political role was real. The frontier escalated when Granadan forces seized Zahara late in AD 1481. Castilian forces answered by capturing Alhama in AD 1482, deep inside Nasrid territory. Neither event was the clean beginning of a conflict created from nothing. Both emerged from a frontier culture of raids, reprisals, disputed truces, and opportunistic seizure. Alhama nevertheless transformed the strategic situation. Its position threatened Granada's interior, while its symbolic importance made its abandonment politically humiliating. Ferdinand and Isabella decided to hold it despite the enormous burden of resupply. As external pressure intensified, Muhammad XII challenged his father and claimed the throne. Granada now faced a stronger enemy while disputing who possessed legitimate authority to direct the defense. Abu al-Hasan's brother, Muhammad XIII, known as Al-Zagal, or the Valiant, created a third center of military and dynastic power. Commanders, districts, families, and urban factions were forced to choose among rival claimants, each promising to preserve a kingdom their competition was steadily weakening. In AD 1483, Muhammad XII launched an offensive near Lucena, seeking the military prestige needed to strengthen his claim. The operation ended in defeat and capture. For Ferdinand, the prisoner's political value immediately exceeded his battlefield importance. A captive claimant could be released under obligations, selectively recognized, and returned to Granada as a rival sovereign. It was a masterstroke of controlled instability. Muhammad could pursue his throne, but under conditions that connected his survival to Castilian favor and required concessions. His return compelled Nasrid factions to spend soldiers, money, and legitimacy against one another. Every town contested between rival sultans was less capable of resisting Catholic pressure. Every negotiation exposed grievances, loyalties, and fears that Ferdinand's agents could study and exploit. Muhammad XII was neither a mindless puppet nor the coward of hostile legend. He was a ruler trapped between an increasingly coordinated foreign monarchy, hostile relatives, unstable urban loyalties, and the knowledge that rejecting Castilian terms might destroy his personal claim. He maneuvered for survival and sometimes resisted the purposes others designed for him. Ferdinand could influence the civil war, but he could not control every outcome. Promises, hostages, espionage, factional correspondence, and selective recognition all operated within a fog of ambition and betrayal. The uncertainty did not diminish the strategic effect. Abu al-Hasan, Muhammad XII, and Al-Zagal each fought to save a throne. Together, they consumed the kingdom beneath it. With Nasrid legitimacy divided and the Catholic coalition mastering the finance of repeated campaigns, the frontier ceased to function as a zone of temporary raids. It became a sequence of calculated amputations. Fortress after fortress, corridor after corridor, and eventually port after port. Each loss leaving Granada with less revenue, fewer soldiers, weaker communications, and less room to bargain. Granada's civil war had given Ferdinand an opening. The campaigns that followed converted that opening into a system of territorial dismemberment. Ronda fell in AD 1485. Its importance extended far beyond its walls. The fortress anchored a western network of roads, settlements, and defensive positions. Once it was taken, neighboring strongholds faced a transformed calculation. Resistance no longer meant surviving a temporary expedition until the invaders withdrew. It meant confronting a monarchy capable of installing garrisons, securing roads, negotiating separate submissions, and returning with artillery against every position that remained defiant. The western frontier began to unravel. Marbella submitted, other positions followed, and Granada lost the protective depth that had once absorbed invasion. Every captured town became a Catholic supply point, intelligence post, and base for the next campaign. The frontier was not merely moving inward. Yesterday's defensive shield was becoming tomorrow's invasion corridor. Loya followed in AD 1486. Guarding a major approach toward Granada, it had long served as one of the capital's western barriers. Its loss opened terrain and further entangled Muhammad XII, known in Castilian tradition as Boabdil, within Ferdinand's political design. His authority increasingly depended upon Catholic recognition, negotiated obligations, and his usefulness against rival Nasrid factions. He was not a mindless puppet. He continued to pursue his own throne and survival, but each bargain that preserved his position reduced the kingdom over which he hoped to rule. This was conquest by subtraction. Granada did not need to suffer one annihilating battle. It needed only to lose, in sequence, the towns that supplied grain, taxes, soldiers, information, and room for maneuver. A kingdom could remain alive at its center while its ability to act was amputated at the edges. Then came Malaga. The port was among the kingdom's richest and most strategically important cities. Through Malaga moved commerce, intelligence, weapons, volunteers, and the uncertain possibility of aid from North Africa. That assistance was never as dependable as Granada required, but the connection itself preserved alternatives. As long as Malaga remained in Nasrid hands, the kingdom retained a maritime lung. Its capture in AD 1487 threatened to suffocate the Western War. Malaga's defenders understood the stakes and resisted fiercely. The siege challenged the monarchy's momentum and forced the Catholic army to sustain pressure while protecting communications and preventing relief. Artillery battered defensive works, but cannon alone did not decide the struggle. Blockade reduced provisions. Hunger narrowed choices. Internal strain weakened political cohesion. The decisive force was the steady disappearance of every plausible alternative to surrender. When Malaga finally fell, Ferdinand and Isabella withheld the comparatively favorable treatment used to encourage earlier capitulations. Much of the surviving population was enslaved, distributed, sold, or held for ransom. Individual outcomes varied according to status, negotiation, conversion, and royal intervention, but the collective punishment was unmistakable. Malaga had continued resisting after opportunities to submit, and its fate was deliberately converted into a warning. This was calibrated terror rather than uncontrolled fury. Communities that surrendered early might retain property, privileges, or personal freedom under negotiated terms. Communities that imposed a high cost upon the conquerors could face dispossession and enslavement. The contrast divided future defenders before Catholic artillery reached their walls. One town's destruction became another town's argument for negotiation. Terror became more effective when joined to information. Ferdinand and Isabella possessed nothing resembling a modern intelligence agency. Instead, the frontier itself operated as an intelligence network. Guides revealed roads, passes, and water sources. Defectors exposed rivalries. Captives were interrogated. Merchants carried rumors between cities and courts. Local nobles maintained contacts across religious boundaries, while factional correspondents disclosed ambitions that could be purchased, protected, or manipulated. Every siege therefore unfolded across two maps. One contained walls, roads, ports, magazines, and artillery positions. The other contained families, feuds, fears, debts, and secret channels of communication. Ferdinand excelled at making those maps overlap. A fortress could remain militarily intact while its political defenders were already calculating the terms of surrender. After Malaga, the decisive struggle moved eastward into territories associated with Muhammad XIII, known as Al-Zagal. There stood Baza, a principal anchor of the eastern Nasrid defense. If Baza held, Al-Zagal retained a territorial bloc capable of resisting both the Catholic monarchy and Muhammad XII. If it fell, Guadix and Almeria would become dangerously exposed, and Granada would be reduced from the capital of a kingdom to an isolated refuge. The investment of Baza in AD 1489 became a contest of endurance. Its defenses and determined garrison frustrated hopes of a rapid victory. Meanwhile, the besieging army had to consume resources merely to remain in place. Food, fodder, powder, tools, wages, replacement animals, and construction materials traveled over extended routes. Roads required maintenance, camps required protection, and every delay increased the danger that royal finances or political commitment would fail before the city did. Withdrawal could appear prudent. Strategically, it would have been disastrous. A Catholic retreat might revive Nasrid confidence, shake uncertain allies, and persuade wavering communities that the monarchy's expanding power still had limits. Years of accumulated pressure could begin to loosen. Ferdinand and Isabella therefore transformed persistence into policy. Reinforcements and provisions moved forward. Supply routes were sustained. The presence of the court and leading elites demonstrated that royal prestige had been bound to the operation. The monarchy was making a declaration through logistics. It could absorb delay more successfully than Baza could absorb isolation. The besiegers prepared to remain until hope itself became unaffordable. Diplomacy tightened alongside the blockade. The objective was not necessarily to destroy Baza street by street. It was to persuade commanders, inhabitants, and regional elites that continued resistance could no longer improve their position. Relief appeared increasingly improbable. while surrender still offered an escape from the catastrophe imposed upon Malaga. Baza capitulated in December AD 1489. The political consequences moved faster than any army. Guadix and Almeria submitted, and Alzagal transferred his remaining authority under negotiated arrangements. He received concessions and possessions, but his independent territorial power had been broken. His eventual departure for North Africa removed the final Nasrid rival who had commanded a substantial regional base. Muhammad XII remained in Granada, yet the apparent consolidation of his rule concealed the extinction of his strategic options. He possessed the throne without the kingdom that had sustained it. Granada remained populous and formidable behind its defenses, but it was surrounded by an enemy with deeper revenues, protected corridors, veteran commanders, and the ability to return after every campaign season. In AD 1491, the Catholic monarchy closed around the capital. Outside Granada, the fortified camp and planned settlement of Santa Fe delivered a message more powerful than another raid. After fire damaged an earlier encampment, the monarchy established a position built for permanence. Santa Fe declared that the besiegers would not devastate the Vega and then disappear. They intended to remain until sovereignty changed hands. Inside Granada, every pressure intensified. A large population depended upon restricted supplies. Political factions distrusted one another. External rescue had become remote. Prolonged resistance risked famine, internal upheaval, or an assault followed by punishment like that inflicted upon Malaga. Yet openly advocating surrender was dangerous. Muhammad XII could not announce his intention to capitulate without inviting accusations of treason and perhaps losing control before protections had been secured. Negotiations moved through discreet channels. The royal secretary Hernando de Zafra played a central role for the Catholic monarchs, while Granadan representatives tested what could still be preserved. Gonzalo Fernández de Córdoba, experienced in frontier society and diplomatic exchange, was useful within this network of intermediaries. Later legend sometimes assigns the achievement to a single brilliant agent, but the settlement emerged from a collective process of messages, guarantees, factional calculations, and carefully managed secrecy. Both sides wanted to avoid a final urban battle, though for different reasons. Muhammad XII needed protections broad enough to make surrender defensible. Ferdinand and Isabella wanted Granada intact, its population controllable, and their army spared the cost of fighting through a crowded city. The monarchs could demand submission, but they could not assume that an assault would be quick, orderly, or politically cheap. The capitulations of Granada were agreed on November 25, AD 1491. Their provisions were remarkably extensive. Muslims received promises protecting religion, mosques, property, judges, customs, and communal practices. The terms addressed movement, taxation, arms, captives, and safeguards against forced conversion. These were not expressions of modern religious toleration. They were strategic instruments intended to make the expected cost of surrender lower than the expected cost of resistance. That distinction was decisive. Granada had not been stormed. Its inhabitants still possessed enough collective power to place their rights within the price of peace. On January 2, AD 1492, authority passed in a controlled political ceremony. Muhammad XII relinquished the city, while the monarch's standards and the Christian cross rose above the Alhambra, announcing the end of Nasrid's sovereignty. Later memory perfected the scene with solemn keys, carefully staged gestures, and the defeated ruler pausing to lament at the place remembered as the Moor's last sigh. Some form of ceremonial transfer is supported by contemporary testimony. The polished dialogue and emotional theater belong more securely to legend. The documented reality was colder and more consequential. Granada fell through capitulation, guarantees, administrative calculation, and fear, not through a final massacre beneath its walls. The immediate military problem had been solved by promising that the conquered Muslim population could continue to worship, possess property, use its judges, preserve communal customs, and live without forced baptism. Those guarantees had been secured while Granada could still impose a price upon its conquerors. Whether they would survive after that bargaining power disappeared was an entirely different question. For a brief interval, the protections written into Granada's capitulations appeared capable of surviving the conquest. Mosques remained open. Muslim judges continued hearing cases within their communities. Property, customs, and religious observance remained formally protected. The sovereign order was unmistakably Christian, but political loyalty had not yet been made synonymous with spiritual sameness. Archbishop Hernando de Talavera represented this cautious settlement. He favored preaching, education, translation, and gradual persuasion rather than immediate mass coercion. Clergy under his influence studied Arabic so Christian doctrine could be communicated to Granada's Muslim population. Talavera was not a modern defender of religious equality. Conversion remained his objective, but he understood that belief imposed through terror could produce public submission without private conviction. His method treated conversion as a pastoral campaign measured in years. That patience collided with a more aggressive vision of sacred monarchy. During the late 1490s, Francisco Jiménez de Cisneros brought urgency to Granada. Austere, politically formidable, and certain that religious transformation should move faster, Cisneros intensified pressure upon the Muslim population. Particular attention fell upon people described as Christians, or descendants of Christians, who had converted to Islam. Their disputed status became an instrument for penetrating entire households. If such individuals could be reclaimed for Christianity, their relatives and associates could be subjected to investigation, detention, pressure, and baptism. Arabic religious texts were confiscated and burned, while some medical and scholarly works were reportedly preserved. Mass conversions followed. To Cisneros and his supporters, spiritual conquest was completing military conquest. To many Granadans, the campaign violated the guarantees under which the city had surrendered. Unrest erupted in the Albayacin in 1499. Resistance then spread through the Alpujarras and other districts during 1500 and 1501. These revolts did more than challenge royal authority. They transformed the crown's legal argument. Ferdinand and Isabella could claim that rebellion had broken the settlement and released the monarchy from obligations owed to obedient subjects. The fatal weakness had always been hidden inside the capitulations. Their terms were generous when Granada remained populous, fortified, and dangerous to assault. Once the Nasrid state had vanished, the defeated population possessed no equivalent power with which to enforce the bargain. A promise created by strategic necessity had become dependent upon the victor's restraint. In 1502, Muslims in the Crown of Castile were ordered to accept baptism or depart. Exile existed in law, but restrictions involving routes, property, families, and permitted destinations made departure extraordinarily difficult. For much of the affected population, conversion was not one option among equal choices. It was the only practicable means of remaining at home. The policy did not immediately operate in identical form throughout every territory ruled by Ferdinand and Isabella. Muslim communities under the Crown of Aragon remained protected by different laws for longer. The dynastic union still governed through separate jurisdictions, institutions, and political bargains. There was no instantly centralized Spanish state issuing perfectly uniform commands across the peninsula. Yet the direction was unmistakable. Mudehars, Muslims living under Christian rule, became Moriscos through baptism, Christians of Muslim ancestry. The change in terminology exposed the deeper failure of forced conformity. Baptism did not erase language, dress, food, memory, family connections, or private custom. Instead, visible difference was reclassified as evidence of concealed betrayal. The monarchy demanded assimilation, then treated the incomplete results of that demand as proof that the converted population could never be trusted. Granada's Muslims were not alone in confronting the emerging politics of confessional unity. On March 31, 1492, the Alhambra decree ordered practicing Jews to accept baptism or leave the crowns of Castile and Aragon. Jewish and Muslim experiences were not identical. Their legal positions, histories, communities, and sequences of persecution differed. But both reveal a monarchy increasingly persuaded that religious plurality threatened political cohesion, and that unity of faith could become an instrument of unity in rule. The consequences unfolded across generations. Morisco communities adapted, negotiated, concealed forbidden practices, and in many cases embraced forms of Christianity, yet suspicion persisted. Rebellion returned to the Alpujarras in 1568. Under Philip III, expulsion became the final answer. Between 1609 and 1614, roughly 300,000 Moriscos were expelled from the Spanish kingdoms, although estimates vary and the operation unfolded unevenly across different territories. The road from capitulation to expulsion was neither immediate nor straight. It passed through missionary campaigns, local disputes, regional variation, rebellion, fear of Ottoman power, anxiety over North African raiders, and repeated accusations of hidden disloyalty. Yet one logic remained brutally consistent. Once identity itself becomes a security threat, obedience is no longer enough. The suspected minority must continually prove an innocence that power has already chosen to doubt. At the same moment that the monarchy pressed inward against difference, it projected authority outward across the Atlantic. On April 17, 1492, the capitulations of Santa Fe granted Christopher Columbus titles, privileges, and a share in the profits expected from any Western discoveries. He departed in August and reached the Caribbean in October. Granada's surrender did not simply finance the expedition, and Isabella did not rescue the enterprise through the romantic gesture of pawning her jewels. The voyage emerged from prolonged negotiation, court patronage, credit, maritime experience, and financial arrangements in which the royal official Luis de Santangel played an important role. Castilian Atlantic ambition had not appeared from nothing. The Treaty of Alcacovas in 1479 had concluded an earlier conflict with Portugal. It recognized Portuguese dominance across much of the African Atlantic while preserving Castilian claims to the Canary Islands. Columbus's voyage disrupted that settlement by opening claims in an ocean whose geography remained profoundly misunderstood by the Europeans attempting to divide it. Rivalry with Portugal returned on a planetary scale, producing the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494 and an extraordinary attempt by two monarchies to partition vast inhabited worlds through a diplomatic line. Granada mattered not as a treasure chest emptied into Columbus's ships, but as a release of political capacity. The war's conclusion removed a consuming military commitment. Victory enlarged royal prestige, strengthened networks of officials and financiers, and reinforced the conviction that expansion carried divine approval. Institutions trained to collect revenue, mobilize faith, reward service, negotiate surrender, and classify conquered populations now faced a horizon without familiar walls. The intellectual climate reflected the same appetite for order. In 1492, Antonio de Nebrija presented his Grammar of Castilian to Queen Isabella. In its political language, Nebrija associated language with empire. Grammar may appear distant from artillery and caravels, but each belonged to a growing project of classification and projection. Power did not travel through soldiers alone. It traveled through laws, contracts, maps, missionaries, administrative categories, and names imposed upon lands whose inhabitants already possessed names, governments, histories, and sacred worlds of their own. Granada ultimately fell because its extraordinary survival system, tribute, diplomacy, defensible terrain, commerce, and opportunistic alliance, encountered a monarchy capable of sustaining coalitions, financing repeated campaigns, moving artillery, gathering intelligence, isolating ports, and weaponizing Nasrid's civil war. Muhammad the 12th did not surrender because one final heroic charge had failed. He surrendered because the territorial kingdom beneath his throne had been methodically dismantled. But the counter-verdict is darker. The conqueror's greatest strategic strength was their ability to concentrate institutions around a sacred political mission. That power ended the Granada War. It also enabled coerced conversion, expulsion, conquest, and imperial violence on a scale no surviving Iberian frontier kingdom could have achieved. Institutional power possesses no moral compass of its own. It magnifies the purposes placed inside it. The year 1492 was neither the clean birth of modern Spain nor the miraculous beginning of the Atlantic world. It marked a transfer of organized ambition from an Iberian frontier into confessional state-building and oceanic empire. Granada surrendered under guarantees. Practicing Jews were ordered to convert or depart. An expedition received royal authority to sail west. These were not identical events, but they emerged from a political system discovering how far coordinated faith, finance, law, and force could reach. The enduring warning lies within the promises made at Granada. States often offer guarantees while compromise remains useful. Majorities can mistake uniformity for security. Institutions can convert fear into law, and law into categories from which human beings struggle to escape. When victory removes every rival capable of enforcing restraint, what remains to protect the promises made in order to win? Which force mattered most in Granada's fall? Catholic state capacity, Nasrid's civil war, or the erosion of trust? Share one answer in the comments. Subscribe to Archives of Humanity for more investigations into the decisions, institutions, and ambitions that shaped the human story. Then continue with the documentary on the end screen.